colonialism shaped Algeria. Where is Algeria? That's Africa, and that's Algeria. That's Algeria. Algeria was under the colonial rule of France from 1830 to 1962 for 132 years. Before its colonization, it had a long history of contact with Europe and the Middle East. And a large Arab Muslim population. Long before being colonized by France, Spain, and Turkey fought until Algeria was won over by the Turks. The Turks were protectors of the Ottoman Empire. Algeria was now partially ruled by Ottoman Empire. A ruler called a Dee ruled the entire regency of Algiers, which is now referred to as Ottoman Algeria. He only exercised direct control in and around Algiers, with beyliks, leaders of small tribal groups, established in a few outlying areas. The remainder of the territory, while nominally Ottoman, was effectively under the control of local Arab and Berber tribal leaders. Note that this was after the decline of the Berber dynasties, one of the principal ethnic groups in Algeria. Economically, the Regency of Algiers was a principal center of Ottoman power in the Maghreb. It was a base from which attacks were made on European shipping, a major hub of slave market and piracy. The first such pirate establishes himself on the coast of Algeria in 1512. According to some, the depredations of piracy are what prompt French intervention. Sources such as History World, though, dare to argue otherwise. They suggest that the real reason was that in 1827, when the French consul in Algiers had an audience with the Dee, Algeria's Ottoman ruler demanded that the French pay a 31-year-old debt. In some stories, the French consul Pierre Duval refused to give answers satisfactory to the Dee, or in others he starts responding too heatedly, and in an outburst of anger, Hussein D touched the consul with his fly whisk. Charles X takes this as an insult to French national pride and orders a naval blockade of the Algerian coast. When this has little effect, a military expedition is prepared, or maybe it was just the consul's excuse to break diplomatic relations with Algeria. France invaded and quickly seized Algiers in 1830 and rapidly took control of other coastal communities. Since the colonization of Algeria wasn't civilized, philosophies weren't as needed as weapons. Still, ideas of Christian superiority were spread. The idea that their military superiority meant the French were better people overall was also used to control. The methods used were a military expedition that took place June of 1830, and that the French military easily overpowered the forces of the Dee in Algeria. Settlers ensured that all the economic and political power was exclusively theirs, and as elsewhere, the unprivileged majority began to make itself heard during the 20th century. This sprung nationalism and a reaction. Relationship with France, colonialism was different for them. Algeria was treated as if it were a province of France. They viewed it as part of the country or a settler colony with significant population of European settlers that held a great part of political power. In Algeria's case, most settlers were farmers who grew wheat or brew wine. Being settlers gave them a status they would not have in France. They had privileges over the locals such as picking the best and the bigger land. And by 1954, about 1 million Europeans were living in Algeria. century, Muslims were turned into second-class citizens as compared to the settlers. Algerians were called subjects rather than citizens, unless they agreed to stop following Islamic law. Algerians received harsh punishment for offenses like speaking bad of French government or being rude with colonial officials. French Algeria had a lot of racism and discrimination. Algerians had to stay away from certain neighborhoods, beaches, and businesses. And by 1936, out of 4.5 million, only 2,500 Algerians were chosen to become citizens. Poverty, hunger, and malnutrition became very common. To escape this, many migrated to France or to Algeria's towns and cities. Many refused to accept French rule. Their resistance was linked to religion, and Islam played a role in organizing the opposition. After several conflicts with the opposition, the French government labeled Arabic a foreign language. Also, they confiscated land and monitored Islamic schools. By the mid-1940s, many Algerians were calling for independence. Many of this ended with violence. Hundreds of settlers were killed. This caused more Algerian deaths than deaths from the French government, and it caused Algerians to join the nationalists and view violence as the only way to gain independence. So why might the viewpoints of Africans and Europeans be so different? Europeans took advantage of having better military and being more powerful. Having more or less advantages made them be raised in different ways. Viewpoints contrast because the Africans were oppressed and the Europeans were the oppressors. Having better military doesn't mean they're smarter or genetically blessed. It has more to do with economic geography, like the video we watched in class. Guns or no guns, the French brain and the African brain are equal. Still, some perspectives are missing. All throughout the reading and research, we only get input from people in high hierarchical positions. In the reading, it only mentions the Algerians were happy the Ottoman Empire ended. But there are too many accounts of officials and leaders, rather than common Algerians. Without these, we can't possibly get an unbiased and accurate account of what was going on. This cartoon illustrates the Berlin Conference, where the European powers decided who kept what part of Africa. A colonel, maybe British, is splitting Africa up as if it were a cake with severity, and the representatives around the table look amused. It reveals the way the European powers took possession of a continent during the Berlin Conference with no consideration except for themselves, as if Africa were nothing but land with no people. It really shows the agenda people have and how often it does not involve empathy. It probably takes the perspective of Africans and what they felt when seeing their land cut up and handed out like slices of cake. This one illustrates the effect of colonialism in Africa and how the continent was exploited. Although not specific to our case, since the colonizing power was France, it clearly shows how before the Europeans arrived, they wanted to go to Africa to explore, and how for them it was a great opportunity. For Africans, and especially a century later, leaving for the country that took their spot in society seems like a bigger fit than anything else to look for success. It takes the perspective of both young and old Europeans in the 18th century and Africans in the 19th.